Hi everybody, it's Josh with Talk About Trek, and I'm back because tonight I have finished the very first the original first published by Bantam Star Trek novel, Spock Must Die. Spock Must Die. So this was written by James Blish. Of course, James Blish wrote the novelizations of all the Star Trek episodes. This was published, let me see, way back in 1970, first publishing, and this is the 1985 reprint that I have. That's the 1999 reprint. There are several different reprints and covers for this book. There's one right there. So I just kind of set the thing to scroll through so we can just enjoy all of them. I didn't look up any information about who did the covers, so we won't go into that today, but we'll just dive right into the back of the book here. An original Star Trek adventure from the 5-year mission of the Starship Enterprise. Spock Must Die. Captain's Log, Stardate 4181.4. We are at war with the Klingon Empire. Launching an unprovoked attack upon the Federation, the Klingons have broken the terms of the Organian Peace Treaty, leaving the Enterprise stranded deep in uncharted space, cut off from the rest of the Federation fleet. To find out what happened to the Organians, Commander Scott rigged an experimental modification on a transporter system designed to enable a tachyon replica of Mr. Spock to travel faster than light to Organia. But the experiment failed, and incredibly left us with two identical Spocks, one whom is a replica in every way the opposite of our first officer. A traitor whose continued existence poses a grave threat to the Enterprise and quite possibly the entire Federation. One of the Spocks must die. But which one? One Spock must die. But which one? That's the gist of it. And kind of glad that I didn't read the back cover initially, because they don't let on in the book initially that there's an evil Spock and a good Spock. That kind of comes up later on in the story. So, man, it's hot in here. Hang on. Okay. Ooh. Alright, so, two Spocks. One Spock must die. You don't know initially that they're evil, though, so a very interesting story. Again, I don't know. Try to go back to the time, I guess, to 1970 when this was like your only source of new Star Trek. This is what you got. So I have to imagine at that time that was really exciting. To be able to sit down and read a new Star Trek adventure written by someone that you would know has a familiarity with the subject. So now this is taken from the book about books, okay? And this is basically, I think it looks like, because James Blish passed away, I'm not sure exactly when, but he was able to interview his wife, Judy, and she said the novel came about, I think, because they asked for a novel, and Jim tried to think of something surprising, even shocking at the time. Spock had not picked up the habit of dying, and he had been completely taken by surprise at the fan response to Spock. He, like the studio, had expected the hero figure of Kirk to be the idol, and when Spock gathered a huge following and a lot of female admirers, Jim was thunderstruck. I too thought Spock more interesting, and after some discussion, Jim began to work it out in his mind, and began to think more about who he was, and so he became the pivotal character. So, interesting, right? So he decided, just kind of based upon the fan response, to make the main character of the first Trek novel Spock. And I will be honest with you, Spock is the main character of all of Star Trek for me, right? Like, he's the... it seems really crooked. Or am I crooked? Anyway, I don't know, kind of like the icon, of all of Star Trek. The main representative character, if you had to put one forth, would be, wait, over here, Mr. Spock here. There's a lot of Spocks up there. So, alright, let's get into Spock Must Die. Again, this is a novel written in 1970, so you're getting something that is, very much a product of its time, which is, so you're going to get some kind of a little bit of weird language, a little bit of things that maybe didn't age quite so well, but all in all, just a very, I don't know, I guess it holds on. Even so, gosh, we're looking at what, 54 years later here. This book still, holds on, I think, and it doesn't seem even that dated. One of the things that I especially enjoyed about this was he's very good with his technobabble, and there's a lot of very fun, very interesting technobabble that he throws in here, ways to explain how and why these different things happen. So I think he does that very well, and I can't stop sweating. It's not even that hot in here, but he did that very well. He knows the characters, well, obviously from writing all those adaptations of the episodes, and it does some interesting writing too with Mr. Scott, how he writes his accent, and then how the accent stops, like when he gets serious or when he's like pressed for time. So there's some funny things there too that he did. So I mean, obviously, if you're going to be interested in reading Star Trek books, you're going to want to start here because this is like the beginning. You don't want to start here, I guess, but you're going to want to visit here, and you're going to want to see not only Spock Must Die, but some of these other very kind of, early Trek books, which were written at a time when, all you had to go on for that whole universe was just those episodes, those 3 seasons, So just very, very good, very interesting, very fun, and definitely going to read more of these period books. But I'm going to take a break and I'm going to move on to something else, I think, first, before we go back to that. I think we're getting the sweating slightly under control. Lord, okay. So, if you don't want to be spoiled about this 54-year-old story, just go ahead and tune out now, and we'll just kind of dive into it. I didn't do a great job on taking notes, and I'll show you. My book is woefully in disrepair. Look at this. The whole back is off. I need to get like a big roll of clear tape and just like go over the whole thing here. But Spock Must Die, of course, by James Blish, and we'll take some notes here as we talk as well, because that's fun. I did start this book on the 6th of May, and today is the 13th of May. If I had focused, this thing could have been finished, I don't know, 4 days ago, easily. It comes in at a measly 118 pages. And again, was published in 1970. So, the plot of the book, and we'll just kind of set that up here in case I want to make any notes as we're going, is thus. It goes thusly. The Klingons, much to the surprise of the Federation and the Enterprise, have declared war. They're surprised because the Organian peace treaty is supposed to still be in effect, effectively making war between the Federation and the Klingons impossible, right? So something must be going on. So they decide they need to find a way to get to Organia and see, let me get a little closer here, see what is going on. I'll point with my pen a lot too. Now, one of the other things about this book that I found interesting and kind of cool too is the time it takes to get from one place to another. This book itself takes place over I would say an over 6-month period of time. So that's typically you're not A lot of these novels, they're in a shorter span, but because of the distances involved, the Enterprise is traveling like for months on end to get to where it needs to be. And basically, the idea is they need to get to Organia and see what's going on. First, what they try to do, because Scotty thinks it's possible, is that they could beam a transporter duplicate directly to Organia to see what's going to happen. And the book brings up the often talked about subject in Star Trek, I guess, lore. Say you're transported somewhere. Uh, do you die and like a new version of yourself is born here? What happens to your soul? Uh, so that's one of the things that Dr. McCoy is kind of espousing about at the beginning of the book. Uh, but then they decide to go ahead with this anyway because they have to get someone down there to see what's going on Organia. Uh, but when they run the experiment, instead of getting um, one Spock back with all the information they need, they end up having two Spocks. And immediately, they have to figure out a way to kind of designate between the two of them, of course. So Kirk decides, so you got Spock 1, you got Spock 2, and he says this doesn't mean that any one is better than the other. And then he gives Spock 1 his class ring, and he orders him to keep the ring on. He could just take it off, though. That's no good way of identification. That kind of threw me. I'm like, well, how is that going to work? No, you got to give him like a mark or something. McCoy gives him a tattoo on his face, a 1 and a 2, so you can tell them apart. But anyway, it's fine. So they don't tell the whole crew. They just kind of tell the senior staff, and they rotate Spock 1 and Spock 2 like in between shifts. And at first they seem identical, except for some kind of suspicious. One of the things is one Spock immediately is like, we need to destroy the other Spock. The other Spock must die. I don't know if he actually drops title in there or whatever, but yeah. So, and all while this is going on, the Federation is at war with the Klingon Empire, and is not doing well. They're facing some losses, and and you just get kind of like you hear little bits and pieces of how that's going. And again, this is all taking place over months, because now that the transporter thing has failed, they've got to get themselves to Organia the old-fashioned way, traveling by warp. And even going by warp, they are months away. So you have this kind of period of time where they're going through travel and dealing with two Spocks, and then trying to also figure out a way to figure out which Spock is the original Spock. Can they figure that out? I don't know. Bones is on the case. Scotty is trying to figure some things out too. And then I think when they kind of are getting closer and closer to figuring things out, that's when things kind of get crazy. And Spock number 1 barricades himself in Dr. McCoy's laboratory and basically refuses to come out because he thinks she's going to be destroyed. So, and now for months at a time, or another maybe month or so, whatever, Spock 1 is in this laboratory barricaded while Spock 2 is out, and they're still not sure which the original is, but they're still on their way to Organia, and they're getting closer and closer. So as they get closer, Kirk comes up with his plan to basically kind of quickly drop out of warp, get a view of the planet, see what's going on, jump back in, and keep moving so that the Klingons can't detect them, right? So they do that, and when they drop out of warp, they detect some kind of weird screen or something up around the planet, which affects them all emotionally as well. Some kind of some kind of a effect that comes out from the planet that everybody on the ship feels, They bust back into warp after that. They talk about it some more, decide that they're going to need a bit of a closer look if they're going to find out what's really going on. And kind of everybody agrees on that. And Spock 1 and Spock 2 are both being kind of suspicious. So you don't actually know at this point as the reader who the real Spock is, each of them has kind of sent off these signals saying, maybe it's me, I don't know. So that's also kind of a fun part, that they do keep you guessing right up until the end. And see, the back of the book tells you that one is evil, and you don't know that at this point. You just know that there's two Spocks, and they both want to live, and that one of them thinks that the other should be destroyed. So, very good. Now, they have to go back to Organia, and they have to drop out of warp for something like 10 minutes now. They got to get a better scan, a better read of what's going on, so Scotty can kind of figure out maybe what's happening here. So they do that, and now they're in trouble. Now they pick up the kind of this Klingon attack troop that's been waiting right there around the planet. So they bust back into warp again, but now they're on the run, and they're being followed. And they're being closed in on from kind of more than one side. No, they're behind enemy lines here, so they're surrounded kind of on all sides. But they do come up with a plan. They can, now that they're closer, beam down to the planet, and then the Enterprise kind of shoots away again. And then Scotty, Spock 2, and Kirk will kind of see what's going on down there. In the meantime, on the ship, Spock number 1, who was barricaded in the lab, has escaped from the lab and is gone, lost on the ship somewhere. Apparently no internal sensors can detect him. I don't know. But anyway, he's lost on the ship, and they're not able to find him, which is terrifying, really, considering that he's a double of Spock that has all of his knowledge and information. But what he does do is he ends up hiding out down on the hangar deck, and then he steals the shuttle and is able to get away in time in a shuttle. So Spock number 1 is gone. Spock 2, Kirk, and Scotty beam down to Organia. Sulu's in command of the Enterprise with orders to bail. Don't come back for them. If the Klingons are coming, just try to make it back to Federation space, so. I've been talking about this video for 17 minutes, and look, I just noticed at the title, it says, "The Spock Must Die." The Spock Must Die. It's not the Spock. It's Spock Must Die. Anyway, we're not going to worry about that. We're not going back at this point. Oh, but that reminds me, I forgot to mention this, and I'm going to make a note of this here too. There's a term that Kirk says in here, which I'd never heard before, and probably will never hear again. I don't think anyone's ever said it before. Maybe it was a thing back then. But a unit of time called a nano-jiffy. And I like that, man. Get something done in a nano-jiffy. That's what I'm going to tell my kids. Get it done in a nano-jiffy. Right? So, nano-jiffy. I'm bringing it back. Hashtag nano-jiffy. We're doing it. Anyway. The Spock Must Die. One of them. Spock 1, at least. So, they've beamed down to Organia. And it just looks like kind of a barren wasteland until they take their first step. So basically, with each step they take on this planet, they're like thrust into a fresh nightmare. That's what this screen does, kind of sends their nightmares back upon them. And so you have this interesting part in the book where Kirk is kind of like fighting through all these various nightmare scenarios. And then eventually it's revealed that Spock 1 is also on the planet. So now it becomes this battle between Spock 2 and Spock 1, who are like kind of mentally controlling these scenarios, And after a book that was mainly like, space travel, scanning things, technobabble, now all of a sudden we're getting like this really weird, Kirk's caught up in a flood, Spock 1's muddy and he's up in a giant tree, and there's a lot of weird stuff going on, right? But eventually what happens is that Kirk realizes that he does have some bit of control here. So as this mental war is going on between Spock 1 and Spock 2, Kirk kind of puts his will into it as well. And at this point, it's transformed into a big tornado that they're fighting each other with, I believe. And also, funny mental image that you can keep. At one point during the mental battle, Spock 1 flies away with something that appears to look like bat wings. So just think about that. Spock flying away with bat wings, right? So I like to think about those things. One of these other early books has Spock flying on a Pegasus, I think, rescuing Kirk. So some of these old books are amazing like that. You just have some things that you're just like, what? That's wonderful. So anyway, Spock 1 and Spock 2 are battling. Kirk has now imposed his will upon the battle, which turns the tide in Spock 2's favor, and he's able to convince Spock 1 that he shot himself into the atmosphere, and he's done. And then they win. That's it. Spock 1 is basically like dissipated. And basically the whole origin here, very weird, when they tried to beam Spock to Organia, because of the shield, he was immediately sent back and replicated. But the replicant was a mere opposite. So he was a perfectly evil Spock. But you didn't know that at the time because he was evil and he was also logical. So he wasn't going to reveal that he was evil, right? But he was, he had reached out to the Klingons, he was planning with them. But now, they're on the planet. They have to find a way to bring down the shield so the Organians can use their kind of godlike power to end the war again, right? So that's why they brought Scotty along. Why did I say it like that? They brought Scotty along so that he could figure out a way to do that. They make contact with the original Organians that they talked to in the original episode, who they work with to hook up Spock 1's gig, which is what they call a shuttlecraft. I don't know why they kept calling it a gig. But anyway, they hook up his gig, and they're able to generate enough power with this gig. And Scotty's just fantastic knowledge of building incredible things to make like an anti-shield, which shuts down the shield. The Organians are free. And then the final chapter is basically the Organians shutting down the Klingons and shutting down the war. And the book actually ends with them sending all the Klingons back to their respective planets. They basically like, you have 3 more months to get everybody home. After that, all your ships aren't going to work anymore, and you're stuck on your planets for 1,000 years. So, man, harsh ending for the Klingons, I guess, but they did start a war and then killed a bunch of people. And so again, it's one of those books that like has like a huge effect. So obviously it couldn't be, in the real Star Trek canon. But, I mean, none of that matters anyway, because it's just a fun story. So, that's all that I'm looking for. So, yeah, Spock must die, and Spock did die. But Spock also lived. Spock lives. So, wonderful book. I do have one other cover. Let me show you that. Okay, so we've got this cover as well. Here. In addition to that one. So, it's about the only time I will keep a double of a book, as it's when it's one of these older ones, and they just always have these very interesting varying covers. So, Spock Must Die by James Blish. Another one in the books. So, thank you all so much for hanging out with me and listening to me blab about this book for 23 minutes here. It's been fun, as always. Live long and prosper. And we'll see you all in the next video. Bye.